Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zack Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait!
On Halloween weekend, the Jets lose to the Patriots for the 13th straight time. MetLife Stadium becoming a house of horrors on Sunday for the Jets and especially for Zach Wilson. Hey, everyone. Welcome into the Can't Wait podcast. Tim McMaster here along with Zack Rosenblatt, our athletic Jets reporter, and our producer, Marissa Morris. It was supposed to be revenge week for the Jets. Instead, it was just more of the same in this rivalry where it just seems the Patriots are the hammer and the Jets are the nail. We're going to get to Zach Wilson, a lot of that. We're going to talk about the receivers, Elijah Warren, Garrett Wilson. The trade deadline is tomorrow. We'll talk about that as well. So let's get right into it. We got to start here, Zach. There was a poll. There was a lot. We talked about it on the podcast last week about you.
I said I wouldn't get shamed into doing it.
You did. You did. And then the poll went up and the fans spoke, and I think it was 85% said they wanted you to be there early for walk-ins, which just isn't right. I feel like those weren't our listeners.
Yeah.
Our listeners would not have done that.
It was just Connor just bringing his trolls along with him, and
yes,
he's one of them.
So I will give you this. You went, you did it, but you gave it some style. There it is.
I decided if I was going to do this ridiculous thing, I would just embrace the ridiculousness. I found this old Chewy onesie, Chewbacca onesie that my brother got me years ago that I've never touched. I threw it on. It was pretty comfortable, honestly, because it was pretty cold in the morning. Did not keep it on all game, although I guess that would have been the boldest move. But yeah, I figured I would do that. I was getting there. I just started an Instagram account, so I'm pretty cool like that now. I was getting a lot of the people walking in. Had to make sure. Oh, thank you for acknowledging how cool, Tim. I appreciate it. And then I made sure I was there for Chris Streveler walking in, which I was. He held the door for someone else, which is very kind of him.
I noticed that too. I was
gonna get it. We're actually gonna have to talk about Streveler today. We don't need to do it right now, but we're gonna have to at some point. Yeah,
he's in the rundown. But yes, I noticed that he comes through. He opens the door. He walks through. Then he notices somebody's coming behind him, and a gentleman holds the door for the next guy. I didn't see any other players doing that.
That's true.
Yeah. All right. So do you have to do that every week now? Are you going to come up with
I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. Off the hook?
I feel like
maybe you can just.
It's more interesting on
covering.
It's more interesting on the road. It's more interesting on the road because guys, I feel wear more bold stuff on the road, kind of thing. People do seem to like that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was hoping guys would be wearing Halloween costumes because I know some guys do that right before Halloween, but there was none. Ty Johnson, shout out to Marissa, was he came in. He had a Michael Myers mask. He put it on for 10 feet just so this Jets video social media team could get him on video. And then he took it off and went in the locker room. So it's not like he was wearing it all. So it was kind of fake. And I saw the fake situation going on there. Not to, peel back the curtain too much on Jets social media team. But yeah, I was hoping to see some Halloween costumes and there were none. So that was disappointing.
Unfortunately for the Jets, those pregame walk-ins were the highlight of the day when it comes to the team. It was downhill from there. Well, I shouldn't say that. They led early on in this game. But let's get into the game, and we have to start. There's nowhere else to start. We have to start with Zach Wilson, 20 of 41, 355 yards, first ever 300-yard game for Zach, not one that he will remember with warm fuzzies, I guess. 2 touchdowns, but most importantly, 3 interceptions and just bad interceptions. And I know this was the quote from him after the game when asked if he put the loss on his shoulders. He said, no, but I need to play better. I think everybody else that watched this game, for the most part, put this loss on Zach Wilson's shoulders. It was a game that was very winnable from start to finish. And they just, in my mind, were kind of failed by the quarterback position. I wanted to start by going through the interceptions, and then we'll get into all of this. We got plenty to get into with Zach. The first one was right before the half, kind of off the back foot, just sails it over the running back. Easy interception. And that's a common theme here. Easy interception. The second one was late in the third quarter, in which he was actually trying to throw that one away. But there, when you're throwing it away, throw it away.
Which doesn't really make it better. Yeah.
Right. He tried to throw it away, but it stayed inbounds. Devin McCourty able to scoop that one up. And then fourth quarter, again, the last one, I mean, if they had made an immediate tackle, it almost felt like a punt, right? He just kind of threw it up for grabs. Unfortunately, the Patriots got a good return on it as well, and it was downhill from there. But it wasn't just interception. It wasn't like he tried to thread a needle and it didn't get there and it was picked. It was off balance, trying to throw it away. It was just ugly interceptions. And that's always been the case since we've started following Zach Wilson here with the Jets.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part to grasp. Like, it wasn't anything the Patriots defense did. Even Zach said that. Although I thought it, it was interesting. He kind of like, I can't think of the phrase, but the first interception, he kind of like passed it off like that one, like, that was just a football play or whatever. But I thought that was a bad decision too. It just wasn't as bad as the other two. It was Ty Johnson, actually. He just off his back foot, threw it over his head, and the Patriots were able to easily pick it off. Those other two interceptions, like, it had nothing to do with what the Patriots did. He said on the first one that he was trying to throw away, like he let Matthew Judon get a little too close to him or something like that. But, if you want to be like a glass half full guy, you can be like, okay, so these are correctable mistakes because it's not anything that the defense is doing if he just throws the ball out. But at the same time, he's been making these mistakes over and over and over again. So at a certain point, you have to wonder if he's capable of not doing that because, last week I alluded to this. He had a quote, which I thought was fascinating, that he was admitting this, about how he does not like throwing it away every single time. He wants to make. Sometimes it gets it gets frustrating to him that he has to throw it away every time when he wants to make a play, and so he forces it. And it was something to listen to and keep in the back of your head because he's gotten, I think, lucky in recent weeks. Everybody was pointing out the no turnovers, but he's gotten close to a bunch. Like, he's had a lot of plays like this where instead of throwing it away, he'll just like throw it up in the air, and then the other defense just happen to not come down with it. So it's not like this is like new and it was only this week. And then he does that again. And like, I really do think you have to put the loss on him. And maybe it's not fair to put it on one person, but like the rest of the team played pretty well. The running game didn't really get going, but the Patriots were purposely trying to make Zach Wilson beat them. Garrett Wilson had a great game. They had a 10-3 lead. And I know I've seen people try to say JFM's number one and Zach Wilson's number two. And JFM's roughing the passer penalty was bad. You can debate whether it deserved to be called that, but the reality is they're going to call that penalty more often than not in the modern NFL. So you have to really think about that because when he hit the quarterback, Mac Jones, he had already let go of the ball. His quarterback hit was not going to impact the play. And I get your instinct is to knock the quarterback down at all costs, but it cost them because that's a pick six. It turns 17-3 into 10-3, and then they get a field goal and the Patriots score after halftime. Anyway, they're only in position to get that roughing the passer penalty because Zach Wilson threw his first interception right before it. Like, I think people are forgetting that part. It was at the end of the second quarter, less than a minute left, and Zach Wilson makes this terrible decision where the Jets would have moved their way up the field, probably at least gotten a field goal, you would think. And so you go up, maybe you go into the half up 13-3. Instead, you go into the half up 10-6. And then they score a touchdown in the second half. It felt like the interception and JFM penalty combo like just deflated everything. The defense started struggling a little more, but they were still very much in the game in that second half when Zach Wilson just makes those inexcusable throws. And we've reached the point. For weeks we kept saying they're kind of winning in spite of him. Imagine how good they could be if he actually played up to his potential, because you have this really talented roster and you have a quarterback not playing that well. So how good could they be if the most important position on the field is playing well? But now you're saying that these are kind of the mistakes he's been making, and this was the first team to capitalize on them. And then you look at the schedule coming up, and you have the Bills at home. You have the Patriots on the road after the bye. The Patriots clearly know what they're doing against the Jets. Then you have some, the rest of the schedule looks harder than it did before the season. You have the Bills again on the road. You have the Vikings on the road, who are pretty good. You have the Seahawks on the road. They look really good. And you have the Dolphins at the end of the season on the road. So that's like 5 or 6 games that are going to be really hard for Zach Wilson to handle. And so all of a sudden, this 5-3, you're ecstatic going into the bye week with 5 wins because none of us would have expected that. But at the same time, like, how long are they going to be able to hold on to that if Zach Wilson is playing like this? And, we're going to get into what this means for, how they approach the quarterback position going forward and all that stuff. But it was a very alarming game. And we've reached the point now where until Zach Wilson proves he can do better, like, why should we believe that he can? He had that fourth quarter in the Steelers, which everybody in the Jets keeps pointing to, coaching-wise, him, as an example of what he can be at his best. But if you remove that quarter, the 19 other quarters, I had this in my story. I don't have the story pulled up right now. But the numbers,
I have the numbers right here.
If you want to say them.
Fourth quarter versus the Steelers, 10 of 12, 83.3%, 128 yards, touchdown, no interceptions, a 138.9 rating. His other 19 quarters, 52.3%, 773 total yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and a 59.5 rating.
Yeah, so he's been great in one quarter and pretty bad, below average in every other quarter. And it's very, the Jets have, Connor has actually started this discussion actually just on Twitter, like about between him and Sam Darnold, who's better or whatever. For all Sam Darnold's faults, and he had a lot of them, I think he had a worse supporting cast than Zach does right now. Maybe last year Zach had a bad supporting cast, but right now Zach, the offensive line is an issue, and that should be said. Like, he was getting pressured a lot, which is why he's not good under pressure. But they don't have Elijah Vera Tucker now for the rest of the season. Who knows when George Fant's going to come back? They're playing Cedric Ogbuehi at right tackle, and he probably is not a starting offensive lineman in the NFL.
By the way, according to Ian Eagle, it's Ogbuehi.
Ogbuehi. Oh, wow. Okay.
I think
I trust Ian Eagle.
I think that's what on the broadcast.
Dwayne Brown didn't have his best game. And you don't have Breece Hall anymore, who was like a great security blanket for him. So, like, the reinforcements aren't really coming offensive line wise. So you have to deal with what what you have in front of you. And, another thing the Jets have kept thank you, Taylor. Like, another thing the Jets coaches have kept saying is, the Broncos make every quarterback look bad. Packers have a great pass defense. The Patriots have at a certain point, it doesn't matter what the defense is. This guy was picked second overall. He's going to be making his 19th start coming up. Like, he has to be able to overcome that at a certain point, and he hasn't been able to. And it's not going to get easier. Like the Bills don't have a weakness on defense. They're going to get the Patriots again, like I said, and those are the next 2 games. So I don't really know how you fix this. I mean, the reality is they just need Zach to not make those mistakes. If he stops making those mistakes, maybe they can get by, low scoring games and stuff like that, but you shouldn't be trying to win in spite of your quarterback. And if he keeps playing like this, then you have to start wondering like what they do at that position.
So the big excuses, right? That if you're going to use excuses to try to defend Zach, one is the offensive line.
Yeah.
And then he's running around for his life. You can argue he's not getting rid of the ball fast enough too. But and then the other one is the caliber of defenses they've faced, which you just brought up. They have, the Patriots have a good defense, right? But it's not. I mean, the Bills
got killed by the Bears.
Much better defense. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they've played good defenses, but like it's the NFL, right? They're all good defenses.
You can say that every week. Yeah.
The really good defense is coming up this week, so we're certainly going to see how that goes. What are your thoughts on, like, there's an argument to be made that his escapability has allowed them to avoid sacks, but then he doesn't get rid of the ball quick either. Like, if it was 3 steps back, unload, that's a way to avoid that too, right? You can avoid pressure by running for your life, or you can avoid pressure by getting rid of the ball quickly. Are the receivers not open at that point, or is he not seeing things in time?
I mean, it's probably a combination of all those. I think it was the second interception. Both of them are so bad, it's hard to remember, but I think it was the second one where none of the receivers were open. And I think it was the second. Like, I thought none of them were open. And so he pretty clearly should have thrown it out. He kept waiting. Then he just launched it up. I think it was Conklin that was technically the one he was targeting. Like, if the guys aren't open, throw it away. You live to fight another play is the thing. And it's pretty clear that the running game is not going to be as effective without Breece Hall, which is, it's unfortunate. Like Michael Carter, there were some plays where he was getting some good runs, but he just doesn't have that second level burst to where, if Breece Hall was there, maybe a 10-yard run is a 25-yard run. And I don't think James Robinson has that either. So it's going to be short, small chunks in the running game. Maybe you start using Zach Wilson more as a runner. I don't know. But they're not going to be really able to fall back on the running game as much as they did during that 4-game winning streak. So they need Zach to make plays. And, I know a lot of people have said maybe they just play Elijah Moore more. And I think there's some merit to that, but I don't think he would have saved them in this game yesterday. He only played 10 snaps. I think he only ran routes on 7 of those snaps. And he was targeted once, and it was batted. Zach Wilson pass that was batted down. We can get into Elijah at some point if you want, but the point being, like, the weapons are there. Like, Garrett Wilson had a great game; it didn't ultimately matter. really when you're a quarterback, you could have Zach even had some really good throws, by the way. Like he had the 53-yard pass he had to Garrett Wilson was very good, perfectly placed down the field in front of a few defenders. The Tyler Conklin touchdown throw was one of the best throws he's made as a pro. Just a laser in there. It was in tight coverage. Clearly has a connection with Garrett and Tyler Conklin, not as much with like Elijah and some of the other guys they have on offense. I mean, Denzel Mims had a great catch and run too. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what the solution is here. The simple thing is if he just has to throw the ball away more and live to fight another play, because he's going to get pressured all season unless they go out and make like a blockbuster trade for a starting right tackle, which I don't think they're going to. I think they're more likely to add like a serviceable guard or something like that at the trade deadline. But like reinforcements aren't coming, like I said. So Zach, they need to figure out if really even more than the possibility of making the playoffs, which is crazy that like we went from like saying they're not going to make the playoffs to now if they don't make it, I think fans are going to be mad. They needed these next however many games I've left, 9 games, are going to be all about figuring out if Zach Wilson can improve and if he can be their guy going forward. Because so far he has not shown that he can be.
All right, one more thing on Zach. They moved Mike White up from 3rd string to 2nd string. And the idea from Saleh, from what he said, was like, if the opportunity presents itself, we want to know what he can do. Which I assume mean like if Zach Wilson gets hurt and has to be spelled, we get Mike White in there instead of Joe Flacco to see what he can do. Let's say they keep going, win a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game. We get to the final couple of weeks of the season, few weeks of the season. Wilson's still not playing any better, but somehow they're in the playoff race. Like, is there a world where they try something different to get to the playoffs and see if something else works? Because then the question after that is like, you could then still say Zach's our guy, right? You could play the, I don't know, Debo Sweeney did that with Clemson there, replacing the quarterback, getting the win. You go back to the starter eventually, but like it also creates just this big stir, right? So I don't know. Is there a world where that happens this season where they could actually bench Zach Wilson when he's not injured?
I mean, if he keeps losing them games like he did, like you have to at least consider it. Because right. I mean, if you look at like I keep mentioning this next 2-game stretch, if they lose both these 2 games, that's a 3-game losing streak. And if he's making the mistakes that the Bills one, I think you could just call a loss if it's close. You feel better about that because they're just so talented. I don't anybody before the season, even when they were in their winning streak, I don't think anybody was expecting them to beat the Bills. But if they go out in that Patriots game, the same thing happens, and then you start going beyond that, and games like against the Bears and these teams that they're supposed to be beating, like I think they play the Lions at home. Like if they go against those teams and Zach Wilson is still making back-breaking turnovers and mistakes that are costing them, you have to think about how the rest of the locker room is thinking about it. Because look, yesterday everybody else pretty much did their part. The special teams had a bad day too, I should say. But everybody has done their part. This team knows that they're talented enough to win games. So if they go out there, they do their jobs, and the quarterback makes a boneheaded turnover 3 times a game, 2 times a game, 1 time a game, and it costs them, then what do you think people are saying in the locker room? They're saying the same things we're saying. They might, put on a brave face at the podium and stuff like that. I think Elijah Moore made it pretty clear in my eyes that Zach Wilson is one of the main reasons why he's not happy. So if that'll start spreading around the locker room, and everybody will think about what Mike White did last year. Whether that's the reality of Mike White is another conversation. But and the way they handle this backup QB thing is still. We're going to talk to Robert Saleh at 3:15 today. We're recording this in the morning. So they called up Chris Streveler from the practice squad, like elevated him from the practice squad. And then then on game day, he and Joe Flacco were inactive, whereas Joe Flacco is the number 2 quarterback all year, obviously. All of a sudden, Mike White's the number 2 quarterback. We asked that after the game. Saleh doesn't really give a real explanation for why. And then he says that Mike White is the number 2 going forward, and asked why. He's like, well, if he gets the opportunity, we want to see what he can do, kind of thing, which is a weird thing to me because Joe Flacco is pretty locked in as their number 2, and everybody in that locker room seems to like him. It makes you wonder if they're trading Flacco or something. I don't really know. But putting Mike White there, he's a fan favorite. He's always going to be. He's Mike F. and White. Like he has his jersey in the Hall of Fame. So if Zach keeps struggling, you're going to hear calls for him again. Like it happened last year. when he played well, and then Saleh wouldn't say that he was going to give the job back to Wilson, and it caused a whole uproar and all that stuff. Then Mike White made it an easy decision when he threw like 4 interceptions or whatever. But it's going to be in the back of everybody's head, fans, his teammates, all of that stuff. And I'm going to be very curious to see how they handle it, because this team like is the best case scenario is Zach Wilson plays better because he has the talent. Like, the talent is obviously there. He has the arm talent. He just makes a lot of really, really confusing and bad decisions. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how they handle this. Like, is their goal to make the playoffs, or is their goal to evaluate Zach Wilson? How do you balance the two? And it's going to be pretty much the storyline. Let's move past the Bills game. From the bye week onward, it's going to be everything that matters.
All right, you mentioned Elijah Moore. I want to get more into that, but first we got to take a quick break.
By now, you've heard us talk so much about Liquid Death because we're all pretty obsessed with it. You may start noticing there's some strange tall boys of beer in the bottled water section of your local stores. Well, it's not beer. It's actually mountain spring water from the Alps, and it's called Liquid Death. And let me tell you, it is amazing. Why is the water called Liquid Death? Well, because it will brutally murder your thirst, and their infinitely recyclable tall boy cans are helping to bring death to plastic bottles. They also donate 10% of the profits from every can sold to help kill plastic pollution. Plastic isn't actually recyclable anymore, and most plastic you throw in a recycling bin actually gets sent to a landfill. Liquid Death is not only great tasting water, but it's truly helping our environment. Liquid Death also comes in 3 different flavors, and sparkling, which is personally my favorite. If you want to try Liquid Death, go get Liquid Death at your local Whole Foods Market, Target, and Stop & Shop stores, or find a Liquid Death retailer near you with the store locator at liquiddeath.com/wait. That's liquiddeath.com/wait. Reserve Bar is your online source for premium and luxury spirits, wine, and champagne. And now Reserve Bar offers same-day delivery. Reserve Bar has a vast lineup of rare and hard-to-find bottles, premium brands, celebrity spirits, and limited releases that you just won't find at your local store. No one does spirits gifting better than Reserve Bar. Looking for an elevated gift? ReserveBar.com has you covered, and you can have that gift delivered right to your door. Even better, turn that spirits gift into a cherished memento with custom engraving, perfect for birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, any holiday, you name it. Getting into home bartending? Reserve Bar has everything you need. Spirits for the shelves? Sure, but they also have every barware tool and glass you'll need. If you want to try, visit reservebar.com today and use the promo code WAIT to save $10 off your purchase of $75 or more on spirits, wine, or pre-made cocktails, but only when you use our special offer at reservebar.com with the code WAIT. That's reservebar.com, code WAIT. This offer expires December 31st, 2022.
All right, let's get into the receivers and Elijah Moore. He had a few post-game gems, I guess, quotes, Zach, things that we can talk
very
about.
Interesting,
that's for sure. We knew we were eventually going to hear from Elijah Moore, and we had actually talked about it last week that after the game made the most sense, hoping that it would be a Jets win in which Elijah Moore caught a couple passes, maybe even a touchdown. It didn't go that way. It was another loss, and he had, like we said earlier on, just 10 plays, 1 target. So some of these quotes before or after the game, the one you mentioned, he said, on chemistry with Wilson, I don't know. I couldn't even tell you. I don't get the ball. I don't know, which doesn't speak much of the chemistry with Wilson. And then I
think he answered it without answering it, kind of thing. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And then there was this one when he was asked about being basically, in a week where the team had won, being in the news and kind of messing everything up. That's the part I wish I could have kept internalized. I hate being a distraction. If I could take that part out and just keep everything else that was going on, I wouldn't change a thing. I still stand on it, not being about me. It's just the way this business is. You guys can say what you want. You can write what you want. At the end of the day, everyone is going to do the best they can for each individual. I've got a family to feed too. Now, here's a statement for all athletes out there. Never say, I've got a family to feed. Just remove it.
It's the Latrell Sprewell thing where he was getting paid like $1 million and he's like, I need to feed my family or whatever.
Yeah, and I get like Elijah Moore's on a rookie contract, whatever. But have you seen the rookie contracts? Like,
He's
and
doing
I get
just
what he's
fine.
saying.
Yeah.
Yes, what he's saying.
His point is he's hurting his value.
I need to prove myself because there's another contract coming. I get that. It's a business. These guys need that. That's a short. You're not a pro athlete for very long. You got to maximize the money. I get that. But it's your second year. Like, it's the beginning of your second season. It's not like I'm heading towards free agency or I'm heading towards, I need them to pick up my next year. Like, there's time. Like, slow down and don't use the quote, I've got a family to feed. All right. I'm just going to pass it over to you now.
Yeah, it's I found it. He made it pretty clear that he doesn't regret everything that happened. He just regrets that his trade request got out, I think, is my interpretation of it. Which I get to a degree. But also what did he think was going to happen when you do something like that? It's going to get out. That's just the way the NFL works. I can't imagine many trade requests don't get out these days, especially with Rap Sheet and Schefter basically being on a group message with the higher ups on every team. But yeah, I don't know. It's I wrote about this morning. I think it's going to go up this afternoon. At a certain point, I feel like it's best for both parties if they just move on. If they were, so Robert Saleh says that his snaps weren't limited yesterday because they were punishing him. Believe that or not, whatever you want. But the reality is he only played 10 snaps, was targeted once, clearly not a priority in this offense anymore. But I also think he's clearly talented enough that you can get at least what the Giants got for Kadarius Toney. And I would think you could get more because he's a more reliable player than Kadarius in terms of health. And, even off, I would say Kadarius Toney is much worse off the field in terms of immaturity. Honestly, anybody that's followed the Giants would agree with that. So I think you can get some value for him. There's some teams that really need wide receivers: Packers, Giants, Titans, some of these teams that are still trying to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to trade him, but I don't know. I don't see the point of, just keeping him on the sideline every week. Like in the way that they did. Like I had said, they should have benched him through the bye week. And I do stand by that. But if you're not going to do that, then I'm not sure what you accomplish by playing him 10 snaps and not really using him. So I don't know. He seems pretty clear that he's not going to change his mind about how he feels. He kept saying stuff like, not everybody knows everything that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, that was weird stuff too.
He said that over and over again. Which stuff like that kind of annoys me sometimes when guys do that, because they're in front of a microphone. If you really wanted to give the full story, you're allowed to do that. All we can do is judge based on the information that we all have in front of us. So,
right.
Anyway, so I think it's pretty clear that he's not happy with Zach Wilson. I think, he said he and Mike LaFleur are fine. I can't imagine that that's entirely accurate. I know they hugged it out at practice or whatever, but Elijah Moore is making it pretty clear that he doesn't understand why he's not playing more while he's not getting the ball. He still was saying that, and I don't see this going away unless they all of a sudden make him a priority. But also, if you do that after a guy just keeps complaining, how does that look to the rest of the locker room? I don't see much of a win-win. I would say if he starts going off, then that would heal all wounds or whatever. But I don't think he and Zach Wilson have a particularly good chemistry with each other, is my impression. And Zach Wilson is going to be the quarterback, I would think, for the foreseeable future, even with all the stuff we were talking about. So I don't know. See what you can get for him is what I would do. I don't think they will, but it's just a weird, unfortunate situation where a guy you drafted in the second round last year, I think it's already best for both parties if they kind of part ways, especially since once Corey Davis comes back, and I think Denzel Mims is showing he deserves to be out there. So you have Mims, you have Davis, you have Garrett Wilson, you have Braxton Berrios. That's still a solid 4 receiver group. And you could find another Elijah Moore in the draft next year. I think there's good receivers that come out every year. I would move on, live to fight another day, get some assets. Maybe if you want to flip those assets for an offensive lineman, something like that, that makes sense. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really see a way out of the situation that doesn't end with him on another team, whether that's now or in the offseason.
So has your opinion changed basically between, us talking last week and then hearing from him after the game? Did that kind of shift where you think this is headed?
Not to where I think it's headed necessarily. I will say I understand more where he's coming from, even if I don't think he handled it the right way. I get what he's saying where, I think he showed last year that he's good enough to play a lot and get targets. And, I haven't really understood how they're using him, making him only go on go routes and stuff like that, instead of using him in the slot more and stuff like that. I don't think they've used him the right way necessarily, and he hasn't gotten the ball at all. So you get why he would be upset about that. The way it got out is what was the problem was, and how he had to get sent home from practice, and how he, avoided talking publicly until after the game, made his teammates kind of talk for him and all that stuff. Like they were in a winning streak and he's complaining. Like it was all a bad look. But I to a degree, I think he made some fair points, other than the feeding the family and all that stuff. But I don't know. It's just such a weird situation. And if he's still here the next time we meet up for a podcast later this week, I'm very curious to see how it plays out, because he's clearly not a priority in this offense. And so every week you're going to have to wonder, okay, he played 30 snaps, got 3 targets. How is he going to react to that? Like every week you have to think about that. You don't want to have to think about that with a guy. So it's a weird spot to be in.
The part that doesn't make sense about all this is just, you think of like the last 2 summers, basically. And I know it was hurt at the beginning of the year last year, but before the injury, so many reports that he was, the most talented guy at training camp. And some of that same stuff this year, where like this guy he just makes plays. He's a star. And it does seem like maybe now he's just in the wrong spot. Like you always anticipated him in this offense doing all kinds of little things where they could get him involved. And then you look at the game yesterday and they have the 2 little flip passes, quick snaps to Zach Wilson, flips to Garrett Wilson cutting across the line. That's the type of stuff I always anticipated them doing for Elijah Moore. It's almost like they had Elijah Moore and they were like, okay, this is a great toy that we can do so much with on offense. But then because they didn't trade for a receiver, they ended up drafting Garrett Wilson, who does the same stuff. And now
maybe like a better version of it.
A better version of Elijah, right? So, and it just kind of pushes them back, even though by all accounts, this guy's ultra talented.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think that's something that people forget about, when teams like load up at one position. I think what they did was they saw a very talented player and they took the best player on their board, the best receiver on their board, and they decided they would figure it out later. But ultimately, I think Garrett Wilson is probably a better version of Elijah Moore in some ways. He's very good after the catch. I think they like him in the slot, which is why you haven't seen Elijah there. So that ultimately winds up, pushing Elijah down the pecking order, and they're not really able to utilize his skill set in the same way as they would have if they drafted like more of a Corey Davis type, who is more of an outside receiver or something like that. So I think that's something that on paper, it looked like they had a great group of receivers, but how much did they fit together? Maybe that wasn't something that was discussed enough. And you're seeing that play out, and it's going to be interesting to see how this goes now, because, who knows how long Corey Davis is going to be out. I will say he looked like he was limping a decent amount when he was coming into the stadium. I don't want to read too much into that, but he has been injury prone. And he's a guy that if they want to get cap space, he's going to be a guy that would be on the chopping block, you would think. And not to get too far ahead of myself, but all of a sudden, like you would think receiver almost looks like a need next year, unless you can figure it out with Elijah Moore. If you can figure it out with Elijah, then you have Elijah and Garrett, and then you get a third one that you like. But they're in a weird spot now where receiver looked like a real strength of this team, and now I'm not so sure it necessarily is at this moment based on how they use them.
And receiver can't be a strength if you don't have the quarterback that's getting the ball too.
Very true.
It's a problem. They can't throw it to themselves. All right. Garrett Wilson was very good. I do want to keep things moving here. Denzel Mims, the big play as well. There were these big passing plays where Zach looked great, obviously, to those 2 guys. But you mentioned Mims kind of earning his way here. He's obviously shown that he can block. That was a great catch and run where he took the contact and bounced off and kept going. I mean, has he developed to a point where, because the problem last year was always like, he doesn't fit this offense. He was drafted for the last offense, and he doesn't fit. He fit what Gase wanted to do. He doesn't fit what LaFleur wants to do. Is there a fit now? Does he fit better now? Has he kind of developed those skills, or is he still like a square player in a round hole, so to speak?
I think he's an ideal like backup for Corey Davis, because he's able to plug. Because Corey Davis's best attribute was honestly his run blocking, which you don't hear a lot with a receiver, but that's what it was. But the difference is that Denzel Mims is also crazy athletic and fast. So I think the potential, like the ceiling, is higher than Corey Davis if Mims is at his best. So it's going to be interesting to see, like, do they still have a place for him when Corey Davis is there? Because he's not someone that's like going to play in the slot. And the biggest thing with him was that he needed to learn other positions besides outside receiver. He wasn't like the base offense to start the game, like over Elijah and even over like Braxton Berrios and Jeff Smith. It was him and Garrett Wilson were out there. I think it was because of the run blocking. But so as long as this team is going to be more of a run heavy team, I think there's a place for him. I'm just curious to see how it looks when everybody's healthy at receiver, because I don't like, are you going to deactivate Jeff Smith? I mean, I would, but it seems like they like him on special teams. And are you going to carry that many receivers on game day? Like that becomes the conversation. But I've been very intrigued by Denzel. I personally would keep playing him, see what you have, develop him a little bit. And then if he looks like a good enough guy to be a starter next year, then you have a guy still on his rookie contract for at least another year or two or another year. And you see what you have there, or you trade him this offseason or whatever. But I don't know. He's clearly more explosive than Corey Davis. You're not going to see Corey Davis make the play that he did on that catch and run. So I would keep seeing what you have in him and keep playing him. And maybe Corey Davis isn't ready to go next week, or he has to do limited snaps, and that's a way you get Mims in the game. But I've been very impressed with him, especially for a guy that wasn't playing at all. You know, he's I don't know how he was doing in practice and stuff like that, but he seemed to be ready to go these last couple of weeks. He played like 40 something snaps yesterday, and his catch came in the fourth quarter, so he didn't wear down either. So promising for sure.
It's just incredible to think like if this guy could become a starting receiver for this franchise. I always assumed he would eventually be a productive receiver in this league somewhere else where he just fit better. If it happened with the Jets, I mean, what a turn for this franchise. But it also makes that terrible draft look a little better. So there'd be that, right?
That's true. Yeah.
All right, trade deadline. It's coming quick. We've kind of teased some stuff. Could they get some offensive line help? The interesting thing is that the biggest rumor out there right now is actually for Bradley Chubb, which would, I guess, strengthen what is already probably the best part of this team, right? Which is the defensive line. I mean, this defense was good against the Patriots on Sunday. 6 sacks. Mac Jones was okay, 24-35, 194, touchdown and interception. The Jets actually outgained the Patriots by 100 yards. A lot of that was garbage time at the end and those big chunk plays. But the defense is good. The pass rush is very good. The front is good. So why would the Jets go out and add that when there are clearly weaknesses on this roster?
You know, there's two ways to look at it. I think the first one is that this kind of falls in line with Joe Douglas' philosophy, where he came up, where he comes from. You know, in Philadelphia, the Eagles are always adding pass rushers. Even they're loaded at pass rusher, and they just traded for Robert Quinn. The Eagles always operate, and the Ravens to a degree too, where he came up. They always focus on the trenches first: the pass rush, defensive lineman, offensive lineman, and so. In theory, you see why they would want to do that. Their whole thing is they don't like the blitz. So if you have 4 guys up front that can just get the pass rush going without having to blitz, then it helps everything on the back end. And, you know, we've talked about it a lot this year because the defensive line's been good. So, you know, in theory, you plug in Bradley Chubb, maybe you're able to slide over JFM to defensive tackle. And say you have a defensive line of Carl Lawson, Quinn Williams, JFM, and Bradley Chubb. And I can't imagine there are many better defensive lines than that. And then you also have like Sheldon Rankins and Bryce Huff and guys like that coming off the bench. And that's just like the ideal elite defensive line. And that defense can be dominant with those guys. So I get all of that. On the flip side of that, you would have to give up probably a first round pick. It sounds like it. Mm-hmm. The Jets, as we just talked about, the schedule coming up is very hard. A pass rusher is not going to fix Zach Wilson, and it's not going to fix the offensive line. So if you're not winning more games with Bradley Chubb, then your draft position becomes better, and then that first round pick becomes more valuable. And on top of that, you have to sign Bradley Chubb to a new contract in order to do this trade because he's on the last year of his deal. And top pass rushers make anywhere from like 20 to 30 million a year, depending on their quality. And he's one of the better pass rushers. So I don't think it makes much sense for where the Jets are right now, especially because after this week, I think it's pretty clear they're not like real contenders. Maybe they can sneak into the playoffs. I don't see them going on a run. Like, I don't think you want to be giving away first round picks for a young rebuilding team, especially one that doesn't have a lot of cap space coming up. I think the better move would be hope that he doesn't get traded to somewhere else, hits free agency, and maybe you try and get him there, if anything. But I would focus more on, again, offensive linemen don't grow on trees. I get that. I would rather they spent mid-round picks or, trade Bryce Hall straight up for a guard or, a serviceable tackle of some sort or maybe another safety because I think the safeties could use some depth. I would not go out of my way to trade a major asset for a defensive end right now. Personally, I know it's exciting because he's a big name, and he would make this defensive line truly elite. It already looks really good. Quinnen Williams, as we've talked about over and over again, has just been absolutely dominant. He was good again. Carl Lawson had a sack. He started to play like what you expected. JFM, if you remove some of his bad penalties this year, he's been really good. I think Rankins has been under the radar. I know there's a Bryce Huff hive in the fan base. He impacted the interception. He hit Mac Jones as he threw it. He seems to make plays like that every game. So they have a really good rotation going on the defensive line. I just think out of all the positions, while I get you want as many good defensive linemen as you want, I would say corner and defensive line, they don't need to be trading for right now. If you're going to trade for an edge rusher, not someone of not Bryce Chubb. See, everybody's named Bryce on the Jets. So Bradley Chubb.
He didn't say Nick Chubb. You go a lot of wrong ways there.
So I don't know. I personally wouldn't do it. I get the thought process, but I don't think the Jets are in a spot like the other team that Peter King mentioned was the Dolphins. I think they make a little more sense because they've spent a lot of money already to compete right now, and they probably have a bigger need at pass rusher. I just don't see the Jets as like they haven't quite reached the level where they should be buying guys like that where you have to give up so much to get them.
Yeah, the thought of a first-round pick, just that Joe Douglas just values the draft so much that I can't imagine the first-round pick. Like when it comes down to it, him being able to part ways with that. If it was like a third, sure, but like it just, to me, I agree with you. Do you think if foot to the fire right now, do they make some sort of move before the deadline tomorrow?
I'll say yes. I think I just have it in my head. I think they're going to go and get, last year they traded for what's the guy's name? The guy who is a doctor now.
Yes.
Like a guy like of that caliber that can either be a starter or just like a good depth spot on the offensive line at guard or attack. Like again, I think tackles. There are a lot of teams that need tackles. I've seen a lot of Jets fans mention Laramie Tunsil, Andre Dillard. That's his name, right? Andre.
Yep.
Andre Dillard, yeah.
Dillard can only play left tackle.
That was about to be my next point. Yeah. Laramie Tunsil is also a left tackle. You're not going to move Dwayne Brown to right tackle at this stage of his career. So I don't see those guys making a lot of sense, though I get like why people think of Dillard because of the Joe Douglas ties. Someone of Dillard's caliber, I think, would make sense, but Dillard in particular, especially because I think that Eagles could probably get a decent return for him too. So yeah, I don't know. I think they trade for an offensive lineman or two, and I could see them trading somebody like Bryce Hall or Jacob Martin for a late round pick. I don't know how much that helps you necessarily, but I think they're going to make a trade. I think for a guard, but I don't see any significant trades because I don't think, as I said, I don't think they're in a place where they should be doing significant ones.
I think if they make a big deal, if they do like kind of shock us all, and
we'd have to do an emergency pod.
Deal. Yeah, well, and we can move up the second podcast a week because I don't know how much anybody wants to preview that Bills game. So
no, I mean if they traded for Bradley Chubb, we certainly have to talk about it. That's for sure.
Yes. Yep. All right. One more thing to get to because I don't think we gave it enough coverage was the Strevler situation. We talked a little bit about it. We talked about him getting to the stadium and holding the door for somebody all important. But it was odd what Salah said after the game about Strevler and the whole, taking him off the practice field, but then deactivating him. He said, we had some things going on this weekend. I'm not going to get into detail in terms of having the opportunity to get him up. A couple of things happened and we deactivated him. It sounds like, from that quote, it sounds like the idea was for him to be active and then something caused them to change their mind, happened. Right?
It was very vague and strange, the explanation, because they said some things happened was the thing he said, which can be interpreted in a million different ways.
Like we were going to make a trade and it fell through.
Yeah,
there's so many.
That's conspiracy theory I've heard that makes the most sense when it hits my ears, because in theory, okay, so let's say they either agreed to a trade with Flacco or they were negotiating one. So okay, Mike White's going to be the number 2 now. Let's call up Strevler just so we have a third quarterback in case of emergency. And then either the trade falls through or they're still negotiating and they're like, okay, well, we don't need Strevler. Because the initial thought, which was interesting to me and maybe getting a little too cute, but the idea was he's mobile. Maybe you have some Taysom Hill packages for him.
I saw some Taysom Hill 2.0.
Yeah, which was, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I think they would probably know what was happening when he came out. And there's a lot of people who are like, are they just trying to be too cute and confuse Bill Belichick the night before the game? That would be a pretty ridiculous thing to, we have to worry about Chris Streveler now for the next hour. Like, right. I don't see that. So the trade thing is the only thing that really makes sense to me. You know, I some people asked if it was to keep him from getting poached from another team. There's no practice squad protections anymore like there were the last 2 years. So a team could have poached him if they wanted to. Like that wasn't going to, like they wouldn't have waited till Saturday at 4 p.m. to poach him. They would have done it at some point during the week. So I don't think that happened. So the trade thing is the only thing that makes sense, especially because of the way they just kind of weirdly made Mike White the number 2 quarterback all of a sudden. So I don't know. Flacco's, I didn't mention him with the trade deadline stuff. I think that's something to keep an eye on. I don't know who would be trading for Flacco at this stage. Oh, the Jets did trade for him last year, so maybe somebody would. I can't imagine I can't even think of teams that would need a quarterback or not. Maybe the Titans because Tannehill's hurt. Like, I don't know. So it's just very strange, and I hope something comes of this. We're going to talk to Saleh at 3:15, try and get some clarification. If they're trying to do a trade, then we probably won't get any like actual. Well, Joe Douglas will speak to us this week, I think. That'll be another opportunity to be like, what's going on here?
Is that something that's scheduled with Doug? Is that like Wednesday?
It's not like an official. They haven't like officially scheduled it yet. But yeah, he's supposed to talk to us. I think he usually does at some point in the midseason every year.
Yeah, especially with the
trade deadline if they do anything. There's not. I mean, so much weird stuff has happened since the last time he talked that there's plenty to ask him about. Obviously, usually how it goes around here. But yeah, this quarterback situation, I just can't make heads or tails of it. I don't really understand what happened there. I think the trade thing makes sense to me, and that would be a logical explanation, but maybe not. Like, I don't know. Maybe they thought they were gonna on Friday and Saturday, they're like, you know what, maybe we can get Streveler some snaps or throw the Patriots off. And then when it came to Sunday, they're like, I'm not so sure. Like, that's the only other explanation I can think of. But as Marissa pointed out, good for Chris Streveler. He got a game check. So
so he was still activated to the active roster, but he was not active for the game. So
you don't have to play to get the game.
Yes,
check, so.
Yes. If you were active versus inactive for the game, part of the 48 with the practice squad elevations.
Yeah.
No matter what, you still get the game check. So
exactly.
Good for him. Good for him.
Yeah.
Well, there's a feed your family joke in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, and if they do trade Flacco, then he becomes the third QB. So they could either keep elevating him from the practice squad, or
they only have 2 more elevations.
Yeah, exactly. They wasted one. They wasted one this week. Yeah,
right. They basically wasted one. So we'll see if that hurts them down the road, or they just sign him to the active roster. But you only get 3, so that is to bring him up and then not make him active is interesting. So
yes.
There's got to be something behind it.
There's going to be something going on, and maybe we won't find out about it for a while, or maybe we'll find out about it tomorrow. But very strange.
Yep.
But it gives us a chance to talk about Streveler for real. And
an actual reason to talk about it.
So that's good. All right, that's going to do it for us. Hopefully we gave you a chance to vent this morning. Tough one on Sunday, obviously, to the Patriots. They get another shot at this Patriots team up in Foxborough in a few weeks. That is going to be a really telling game for this Jets team, I think, after the way it went down at home, getting a chance to go up there to Foxborough against a team that, in theory, you should still match up pretty well against. We'll see how that goes. But between now and then, there's a tough one against Buffalo. There's a bye week. There's a lot of stuff going on. We'll be back with you later this week to get you ready for the Bills game, recap the trade deadline and all of that. If you want to join The Athletic, you can do it for $1 a month for 6 months. Go to theathletic.com/can't wait. For Zack Rosenblatt and Marissa Morris, I'm Tim McMaster. Thanks for tuning in